So I don't know if you're keeping track, but 1 week from today is the beginning of fall. And yeah, woohoo, right? Yeah. So some people, my kindred spirits out there, if you're like me, I love the fall. Yeah, thumbs up. It is my favorite season. I love the weather. It's a little warm for me. This last week has been a little warm for me. I feel like we're in September. I want the 60s. I want the low 60s. I want the high 50s. I want long sleeve weather. I love the changing leaves. I love fire pits. The only thing I'm really not a fan of, I'm not a big hot drink fan. But other than that, I love everything about fall. Well, I'd say one other thing I don't love about fall is just so short. It seems like it's so short, and then it seems like you get 3 weeks of fall, and then winter just comes storming in with, just anger and cold. And, but I love the fall. I love the brief amount of time. I love everything about it. But, I also, full-time job, I work in a school. I work with students. I'm married to a teacher. So I also recognize that fall comes with some other feelings that aren't quite as joyous, maybe some mourning and some sadness, because it means the end of summer. And those slower, lazier days of warm weather and vacations are over, and we're back. We're back in school. We're back to the normal day-to-day routine of the rest of the year. And even though I work in a school, I do work through the summer. But even though I work through the summer still even has a different sort of feel to the work every day. That's a different vibe, a slower sort of feel to it. And then when the fall hits, we're back. And just things get moving. It's a big time of transition that we navigate every single year. And it's not the only time in our lives that we have to navigate a transition from a time like that, where a time where we're moving from one time that feels maybe a little bit more joyful or a little bit more profound in our lives to a time that feels, or we know is going to feel, a little bit more challenging. And some of these things are routine and they happen all the time, like summer to fall, and some of them are a little bit more significant. Well, as we return as a church from fall to fall from summer, we're also returning to our series in Mark. And if you can think that far back, a while ago, we went through the first part of Mark. And in the first part of our series in Mark, we were examining how the kingdom of Jesus challenges people's expectations, both in the first century and today. And as now we're going to be moving into the second part of Mark, we're going to begin to look at what does it look like to follow King Jesus in this unexpected kingdom. And this feels a little bit, as I was thinking about this, it kind of feels like, returning to the second part of a streaming series. I don't know if you watched one part of a series and then it's a year until you come back to the second part and you're like, what even happened in the first part? And you need to go back and watch a recap of everything. You need like a 45-minute recap of everything that happened. We're not doing a 45-minute recap, so don't worry about that before you jump into part two. But we are going to do a little bit of a recap, 30-second recap. So here we go. Previously on Unexpected Kingdom. So we've seen Jesus show up. And he didn't show up as the king that people expected, but he shows up as God himself. And he's baptized, and he's tempted, and he's calling people to follow him, but not the people that you would expect. A king that's going to be starting a movement that's going to take over the world. Not the people you would expect that person to call. He's calling people like fishermen to follow him. And he's doing battle, and he's going into conflict with people, but not the people that you expect. He's not battling Rome. He's clashing with demons, and he's clashing with religious leaders who largely are missing the point of what Jesus has come to say and do. And he's redefining things. He's redefining things like, what does family look like? And what does power look like? And what does holiness really mean? And he calmed storms, and he cast out legions, and he healed the sick, and he raised the dead. And all of this is proving his authority over things like nature and darkness. And he fed thousands with abundance, and he walked on water when the disciples doubted, and taught us that God's kingdom grows in ways that we do not control. And God is in control of the way his kingdom grows. And then he pushed deeper, and he told us that true holiness starts from the inside out. And he crossed every border, whether that be ethnic or cultural or religious, and he welcomed outsiders, and he warned us about the universal pandemic of unbelief. And finally, he looked at his disciples and challenged them, and by extension us, to take up their crosses and follow him, not as a warrior king who's going to overthrow Rome, but as the suffering Messiah who by his death will overthrow sin and death. And ask the question that still confronts every one of us: who do you say I am? And that's where we left off in the first part of Mark. And now, as we pick up again in Mark, the story turns toward the cross and what it means to follow this unexpected king. And we pick up the story of the unexpected king in Mark chapter 9, 6 days after Jesus made his challenge to his disciples to take up their cross and follow him. And we're going to be looking at Mark chapter 9, and I'm going to, just for the sake of time this morning, I'm going to kind of summarize this passage, and I'm going to highlight a few of the key passages as we work through it. But Jesus takes a few of his disciples, just 3 of them, Peter, James, and John, up a high mountain with him. And right there in front of them, he's transformed before them. His clothes become dazzling white, brighter than anything that we could possibly imagine. And then suddenly Moses and Elijah are just there with him, show up, and they just start talking with him. And that Peter, James, and John are watching this. And Peter is sitting there. He doesn't know what to do, what to say. So he just kind of blurts out. He's terrified. He says, "Rabbi, it's good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." And he didn't know what to say. They were so frightened. And then there's a cloud that covers them, and then a voice comes from the cloud that says, "This is my son whom I love, listen to him." And Matthew's gospel actually records the more complete statement that they hear. It says, "This is my son whom I love, with him I am well pleased, listen to him." And then just like that, they look around, and it's just them and Jesus again. And they come down the mountain. And Jesus tells them not to tell anybody what they've seen until he's risen from the dead. But then even that brings up, like, what is he talking about, right? Rising from the dead. Then they rejoin the others, and as soon as they get down the mountain, they find a big crowd arguing with the disciples. And out of the crowd, a man approaches whose son has been tormented by an evil spirit. And he comes to Jesus and he tells Jesus, "I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." And his boy is tormented. He's thrown to the ground. He's foaming at the mouth. The spirit is even tossing him into things like fire and water to try to kill him. And he pleads with Jesus. He says, "If you can do anything, please help me." And Jesus says, everything is possible for one who believes. And the Father, in this raw and desperate moment, cries out, "I do believe. Help my unbelief." And Jesus rebukes the spirit, commanding it to leave and never return. And the boy collapses like a corpse. And Jesus takes his hand, he lifts him up, and he stands. And later on, the disciples are speaking with Jesus, and they're alone, and they ask him, why couldn't we drive it out? And Jesus replies, "This kind can come out only by prayer." So 3 disciples have this amazing mountaintop experience that transcends anything that they've ever experienced before. I can't imagine what must have been going through their minds as they're walking down this mountain after just having had this happen. They must, life is never going to be the same after this. We just saw Jesus talk with Moses and Elijah, but they arrive at the bottom, and they're just, again, immediately surrounded by conflict and tension and disappointment. And we're back. I imagine Peter, James, and John must have been looking at themselves, wondering, how are we back here? What is this? These are the same situations we just left. Actually, things are worse than when we left. And now we're just back? What was even the point? What was the point of the mountain if we're coming back to these same types of situations and these same types of frustrations and the same type of suffering that we just left? And I can imagine this is a question the disciples could be struggling with. And I imagine it's a question that we can struggle with at times when we come off of some profound, significant mountaintop experiences in our lives and think everything is going to be different, only to find ourselves on Monday morning right back in the same circumstances, the same struggles we left. But what we can learn from the experience of the disciples and what will be the focus of our time together this morning is the big idea that the unexpected king transforms us on the mountain to follow him in the valley. Because what we begin to realize when we look at and we study the disciples' mountaintop experiences is that the mountain isn't about changing our circumstances, it's about changing us. Now, the mountaintop experiences that we have in our lives, very likely not quite like the mountaintop experience that Peter, James, and John are having here. We're not watching Jesus, Moses, and Elijah have a little chat together. This is a very unique revelation of Christ's glory, one that actually affirms the identity of Jesus that Peter, just in the previous chapter of Mark chapter 8, had confessed when he said to Jesus, "You are the Messiah." But we do have significant experiences in our lives that have the potential to have a transformative effect on us. Times when we have a sense of God's work, his presence, and his power in a special way. Maybe in a particular ministry opportunity, or a worship experience, a worship service, or a Bible study, or as we'll hear about in a little bit, a missions trip. Some special things happen in these experiences that are similar to what's happening here with the disciples, even if they aren't as obviously supernatural. And we're going to look at a few of the things that are happening here on the mountain. On the mountain, there is a separateness from the day-to-day. As we look at verse 9 of chapter 2, we see that Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up to a high mountain where they were all alone. And often these mountaintop experiences that we have in our lives happen when we are able to be in situations that give us a sense of distance from the normal day-to-day stressors of our lives. And in addition to just sort of like a sense of general peace, distance also has kind of the added benefit sometimes of giving us a better perspective of our world and our place in it. This distance is something that even Jesus needed to be a regular part of his life, as we read in Scripture in Luke 5, that tells us that he often retreated to quiet places to pray. And then this distance gives us the opportunity to also have a unique intimacy and experience with Jesus. And this is certainly something that the disciples had as they watched him be transformed into these dazzling white clothes, and they watched him have this interaction with Elijah and Moses. They had this unique experience. And a unique experience with Jesus can take a variety of forms. It could, whether perhaps it's a sense of just intimacy with Jesus that maybe we hadn't previously experienced. Or maybe it's a recognition of his work in our lives at a certain period in our lives that maybe we hadn't taken note of before. Or maybe a time where we decided to take a step of faith and follow him in some way, and we're just amazed at the way that he's worked. Well, regardless of the form it takes, these happen, and oftentimes we, like the disciples in these moments, then have a desire to stay. And I think you gotta love Peter in this moment, because I feel like he just blurts things out. Like, what does this even mean? What's he doing here? He said, let's just build shelters. Let's just, is he just a shelter for Jesus just to be there? And then, but that's what we want to do sort of in these moments, because we want to enshrine them, right? We want to memorialize them. We want to I just want to relive, if I could just relive this moment over and over and over and over again, if I could just repeat it, if I could just get back to it. I just want to stay in this moment. That's what we want to do with these mountaintop moments. And that was certainly a common sentiment that was shared on our Belize missions trip as we reached the end of our time in Belize. Was a common thing that we heard many people saying was how just sad we were that it was over. I wish that we could stay. I wish we could stay in this moment. We want to stay in this moment where we experience this separation with Jesus and this closeness with Jesus. But here's the thing. The mountain isn't about the mountain in and of itself. The mountain is about something more than just this isolated experience. That's why the last thing we see happening here on the mountain with the disciples is a clarity of direction and purpose. As Peter, James, and John are witnessing all of this, they're surrounded by the cloud, and they hear the voice of God saying, "This is my son whom I love. Listen to him." Listen to him. And then everything is gone, and they're alone with Jesus. And this is the point. This is what the mountain is building to. Listen to him. Follow him. And as we hear these words, something that we need to call back to mind is what Jesus had been saying to his disciples prior to bringing these three up the mountain. In Mark 8, if you remember, Peter has this confession that Jesus is the Messiah. Then Jesus predicts that he's going to be going to his death, and then he follows it up with these words in Mark chapter 8, verses 34 through 36. He says, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for a man to gain the whole world yet forfeit his soul?" Listen to him. The unexpected king is going to walk down this mountain with his disciples and begin a journey to another mountain, where he's going to lay down his life for us. And he's preparing his disciples to follow him in that journey. It's been a privilege to have Andrew and Desiree from Bold Hope here with us this morning and sharing with us. And those of us who had the privilege to be a part of our Belize team serving with Bold Hope last month all felt that experience was quite a mountaintop experience for all of us in a variety of ways. And I'd mentioned that we'd be hearing more about some experiences from this trip. So I'm going to ask some members of the Willits family to come on up and Jim Veith to come on up. And they're going to share a bit about their mountaintop experience serving in Belize. And then we're going to show a short video of some highlights of our week before we move into the rest of the message this morning.
Cool. All right. Hi, morning, everyone. My name is Matt Willits, and this trip has had a great impact on my life. Some of you may know that last year, about this time, I lost my job. And within a short period after that announcement started going out about the missions trip. When I heard it, I laughed to myself and said, there's no way we were going to be able to do that this year. Before I lost my job, me and Beth were talking about doing it because we believed that it would be good for the kids to go out and experience the world and see the world. So anyway, shortly after that, Bess said that she thought we should still go on the trip. And again, I chuckled to myself, saying there's no way we're going to be able to do it. I started a new company to pay the bills for my family during this time, and I felt myself sinking deeper into anxiety and despair for what is this my new life job? Is this what the new normal is? The months and weeks went by to the first information meeting, and we learned about the fundraising again. And again, I was not thrilled about this because we had received some help from the church in the past during this time, and it was a piece of my pride saying I should be able to do this myself. But as it turns out, God's plan was better. So that time where we were flocking was actually some of the most fun times we've had together as a family. We are not the sneakiest people. Yes, sometimes by dogs that just would stare and look at us for a bit and then walk away. And we were able to actually fundraise for the whole trip. Then I was anxious about leaving because I just started a company and I don't know how we're going to make ends meet and I don't know what's coming next. And it was then that actually we left for the trip, and I had a slight panic attack because my cell phone was lost or stolen. Kind of undecided about that. But we were able to find it back, and we were able to find it through the airport. And that's really kind of when I really felt God started working, in my trip through this. I started working with the kids and thinking about myself less and God more. And I found my anxiety would decrease as the week came, and nothing major happened in my business as the week came and went. And it was wonderful to feel that focus of not focusing on yourself, and you don't even realize that you're focusing on yourself, but getting out there and seeing the wider world and being a blessing to others really was wonderful for me and my family.
So I kind of felt like the word for our family, dependence. Dependence on God for the fundraising, dependence on God for his provisions to find Matt's cell phone through the Miami airport, dependence of God on God for his mission and to spread his kingdom. So we served in Maya Mopan, which the sign was there a second ago, and that's in South Belize near Georgetown. So if you're interested in sponsoring any of the kids through the family development program that we are hopeful to go back there. You can always look for South Belize as a kind of earmark of the kids who would be in that area. The Bold Hope leaders, in Belize were Ruben, his wife Lillette, and Jerry, who is also Mayan, and so he was a huge help to help a few of the times when we were interacting with the older women in the village who didn't speak much English. He would translate for us or speak on our behalf. We did the VBS program in the morning at a local church that Bold Hope partners with. Matt and Jack were kind of in the group of the older kids around Jack's age. I did songs and did the mid-age group. And Finn kind of floated around. Craft and snack were his jam. Snack probably for other reasons, access to food. But the first day, we started with 30 to 40 kids. And by the end of the week, there was around 130. Kel knows the exact number because she did the crafts, and she can tell you. 132. And it was just really great getting to know the kids, seeing their joy, seeing them just be kids. I mean, they literally are like kids. And as a teacher, I was trying to manage how much structure do we need to have and how much are we going to let them just be kids and have fun and build that relationship. So what was really cool for us is that the first day in the afternoon, we got to go with the director of the Family Development Program in Belize to 2 homes. And their homes were, they were small, but they were extremely hospitable. They welcomed us in. It was neat to see just how they live in their life and their culture, which was very cultural. We got to meet a little boy named Silvino, and he's in the center and also here on the side. We were there when they got to that he had 2 sponsors. They do 4 total, and so he had 2 out of 4. And the joy that their family had, there were tears. It was a really memorable moment just to be able to share with him that Bold Hope was going to be able to be helping him now, and at least get started with that. And we were very moved by his story. His mom passed away when he was 2. He doesn't have any birth certificate documents, so Bold Hope's going to be working on that and helping him with that. And his dad's not around a lot, so his grandparents are there really raising him. And so it was really neat to know him, to meet him, to be in his home, but also then to see him at VBS. He was in my group. Finn and him became good friends. They liked to make bracelets and necklaces together. And it was just a really neat to build that relationship with him. It was really hard to say goodbye, but it was really great to tell him that we also chose to sponsor him. And so did someone else from our group, not from Grace, but who was there with us, so he's fully sponsored. And so he's able to have access to everything that Bold Hope can offer, and that was really, really, really cool. And then we also visited another family, which is their grandparents raising their daughter's kids. Abrielle's picture is out in the lobby. She still needs 2 sponsorships, so if you're interested. Abrielle and her brother Liam did not have any sponsors at the time, and so the director explained they didn't want to necessarily tell the family that Abrielle had one and Liam didn't have any. So we chose to sponsor Liam so that they can begin to have access. They both now have 2 sponsorships, but they're still waiting 2 more. But their family, it's a local pastor, and he's working full-time, and he's trying to lead his church and trying to raise these grandkids while their mom is away. Dad is not around. Mom is working in a resort. She's gone for weeks at a time. And the grandmother really just, you could see the wariness of just feeling how hard it was as a grandparent to raise these little kids who were very active and very sweet, but very active. And just being able to allow Bold Hope into their home to provide for their family. It was really neat to see the director. She has an amazing relationship with these families. She walks in and she knows their names and she knows their story and she's interacting with them, building that relationship on the ground. And that was really neat. So we just felt like as a family, depending on God and seeing their dependence, going into homes, praying with families, seeing how much they desired and had confidence and hope that God would provide. It wasn't a prayer because they think he'll do it. It was a prayer because they were confident he would do it. And that was something that I think really translated into my life, praying with that confidence that God is going to do it and trusting him in the process, in the waiting. So a verse that stood out to me after our trip was Luke 12:31-34, which says, as Jesus was speaking to his disciples, "Instead, seek his kingdom, and these things will be added to you. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the needy. Provide yourselves with money bags that do not grow old, with a treasure in heaven that does not fail, where no thief approaches and no moth destroys, for where your treasure is, there your heart will also be." As a family, we chose to be dependent on God. We saw the expanse of his good kingdom. We saw the depth and confidence and hope of and dependence the members of the church in this village had. We saw how God is using Bold Hope on the ground, partnering with the local church, and those who come on trips, we are there to partner with them, right? We're not there to tell them what we think they should do. We're there to say, how can you use us? Use us. And to see his kingdom being built in Belize. We acknowledge how independent here in the U.S. we can sometimes feel, and because we do everything on our own, we're successful, and but how I think our family desires to be deeply dependent on God, to go to him first and not to live with any worry or fear, but to have the confidence, the same confidence we saw in these families for our family.
I really liked the afternoon where I could play games and have fun. My most memorable moment was playing volleyball on the last day. You can see in that corner, I'm in the gray shirt. Yeah, it was really fun playing with the kids and just being able to see how they live and play with them.
It was really fun for me for that I got to help with craft and snack at the VBS. I also really liked the afternoons where I could make bracelets with all the kids, including Salvino, and we became friends.
So, when we made a decision to go to Belize, me and 2 of my kids, the whole family wasn't able to go, but I wasn't really sure what to expect. And by the way, I feel like all the orange shirts are over here. I feel like I should be talking to you guys, but I'm not sure how that happened. But I wasn't really sure what to expect, and to be honest, I'm still kind of processing it a little bit. But just to start off, I wanted to say Belize is like, it's an amazing, amazing place. Culturally, it's totally different from the United States, as you would expect. But it's geographically, it's gorgeous. Like half the country is set aside for like game preserves and things like that. And the people are absolutely amazing. I learned that most of the kids actually can speak 4 languages. They all speak English, they speak Spanish. A lot of them, at least in the village where we were, speak a Mayan dialect, and they speak Creole as well. So they're amazing people. But when we got there, I immediately felt like we're not still in Bucks County, Montgomery County. This is a very different place. But a cool thing happened that helped me kind of feel a connection right away. When we arrived, my role was to take a group of kids and kind of shepherd them between the various activities. So we had a Bible story session, we had games, we had crafts, we had snack, and I would take these kids and kind of try to corral them, and which was a challenge. But I was in charge of the younger kids, and in this picture up here on the left, the little girl flashing the peace signs, her name is Arielle. And when I first saw her, I thought, man, I feel like you look familiar. And then I realized that she is the child that we sponsor. And we had no idea that we were going to run into her. I mean, obviously, we knew we sponsored somebody down there, but I didn't even know she was in the village that we were going to. And I instantly felt some sort of a connection. And I told her, I said, hey, I have a picture of you on my refrigerator. And she kind of looked at me for a second like, all right, it's a little weird. But then I explained to her that we were sponsoring her. And so we instantly had a connection. And the little girl in the red shirt is her sister Islyn, and the other girl is her older sister Jocelyn. And we got a chance to go to her house and to meet her whole family, which was great. But that experience of meeting her on day one and helping me kind of feel that I had a connection, even though culturally it was so different, we instantly sort of felt like, all right, we have this connection, we can kind of make this work, and we kind of fell into a routine after that. And as I said, we had a chance to go to her house, so that's her in the top right, that is her mother, and the woman who's half the size of my son is her grandmother, and that's Arielle's grandmother. And we had an opportunity to go into several people's houses. And one of the things that we realized when we went into people's houses was they have nothing. But and when I say nothing, I mean nothing. They would, their floors are either dirt or it's a concrete floor. The entire house is probably maybe slightly larger than your living room at home. And they have 3 generations that sleep there: the grandparents, the parents, the children. And they sleep in hammocks sometimes, and they have nothing. But we were encouraged, though, as we went into people's homes, to focus not so much on what they don't have, but to focus on what they do. And I just wanted to share a quick story about somebody that I met, and I don't even know her name. I'm not even sure that I learned her name. But this was a woman who, she was pregnant, and she was scheduled to have a C-section the following week. And her husband had died in a motorcycle accident shortly after she became pregnant. And they had lived in another part of Belize, and she had to come back home. And she couldn't speak. She was born that way. And so she couldn't really even communicate well with her family to explain the situation and what had happened to her husband. I mean, they knew he died in a motorcycle accident, but that's all they knew. And the whole time that we were in that house, meeting with the family and praying with the family, she was like ear-to-ear smile. She was just exuding joy and happiness. And we had an opportunity to go to a lot of different houses, and the people that we met with, the one thing that they had over anything else was faith. And, that made me start to realize that, you can lose your finances, you can lose your health, you can lose relationships, you can lose your life, you can lose your possessions, but you can't have your faith stripped away from you. That's something that you can hold on to no matter what. And a lot of times, like we went to someone's house to pray for them who had a kidney problem, and the only thing that she did have was faith, because she didn't have access to medicine. She didn't really have access to any solutions. So all she had was prayer. And so it was kind of humbling to witness that. I also included this picture on the bottom. This was the church where we were serving. And I just wanted to include that picture because I think this was taken like in the middle, like on the third day. This is the third day. So and Bethany kind of alluded to it, but on like at the very beginning, I think we had like 30 kids show up, and word just started to spread. And the next day it was like double that, and the next day it was like double that. And I think by the end we had like 900 something kids, something like that. Felt like that. It felt like that. Felt like that. But what I started to realize was that no matter where you go in the world, no matter what you're doing, no matter who you're interacting with, there's always more people that need to hear about Jesus. And so, I'm not always the greatest example of somebody that talks about Jesus all the time, but I want to be. So that's what I took out of it. So thank you.
So obviously you can see it was an amazing experience, and certainly a mountaintop experience for so many of us, and for all of us really, as we were on this trip. And but as for everybody who experiences these mountaintop experiences, we come back, and then Monday morning comes, and then we're sort of left with deadlines. We come back, deadlines are looming. Kids need to be driven somewhere. You're back to work, and laundry needs to be done, and you have this sense of, and we're back. And you're kind of left with, we're kind of left with the question, like, what do we do? Like, what does it look like now to continue following Jesus after you have an experience like this? And this is what the disciples also were faced with. When they came back down the valley as well, like they were faced with so many things. They were faced with conflict with when they saw come back, and the disciples, the teachers of the law, are all arguing with the disciples, and they're arguing with Jesus, and they're faced with suffering and affliction as the father who brings the boy who's suffering with this evil spirit, and they're faced with failure as they are trying to cast this spirit out, and they can't do it, as they see all of this happening, it's also understandable that they're facing doubt. We see the doubt of the father in this passage, but I imagine the disciples are also experiencing some doubt as well. And I think we see that a little bit later when they come to Jesus and they ask Jesus, why couldn't we drive this spirit out? And they find themselves in this situation, and they're back, and nothing about the world has changed. But again, the mountain is not about changing the world. It's about preparing us to follow Jesus in the world. So it can be easy when we're in the valley to feel like Jesus is far from us, or that God is no longer at work in us, or I just want to get back to the mountain. I just want to go on my next trip to Belize, or I just want to get back to that situation where I felt this closeness. But here's the thing: when we're in the valley, when we've come down the mountain, Jesus isn't on the mountain anymore. Jesus came down the mountain with his disciples. He's headed to the cross. He's calling his disciples to take up their crosses and follow him. That's why on the mountain they're told to follow him, to listen to him. That's why we're told to listen to him. Jesus came back from Belize with us and is calling us to listen to him and follow him and rely on him here, just like we did there. Jesus is walking with us in the valley, and it does call back to mind the very famous Psalm 23 in verse 4, where we read, "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." And sometimes I think what's happening is we feel like on the mountain, all we're getting is a glimpse. We're getting a glimpse of the power of God at work. And then when we leave the mountain, we're leaving that power behind. We're leaving that glimpse of the power of God behind. And that's something that we only have access to there. But the thing is, what we're being shown on the mountain is not just some sort of temporary work of God. What we're shown there is the power of God that's actually available to us continually to rely on throughout our lives when we are in the valley. And we see this in the disciples' question when they ask, why couldn't we drive out the demon? And when Jesus is saying, this kind can only come out through prayer. Jesus was saying, it's not your power that drives out this demon or drives out this spirit. It's never been your power that drives out this spirit. It's not our power that enables us to do what God is calling us to do as he's calling us to follow him. It's never been our power. The mountain shows us more than anything else that we need to live in dependence on the power of God. And the mountain is not a temporary glimpse of the power of God that we strive to get back to. It's a power that we have regular access to through prayer. And that's actually more of a miracle than the mountain because it's every day. It's just less flashy. The presence of prayer in our lives is the primary way that dependence on God is lived out. The mountain prepares us to live in this dependence. And this is what we need to look for when we have these mountaintop experiences, wherever they take place, whether it's a missions trip, whether it's a Bible study, whether it's men's retreat or women's retreat or our youth retreat or just a worship service or wherever it's happening. We need to be asking ourselves the question, how is God preparing me now to follow him when I walk down this mountain? And in 2 Peter, we do find that Peter did continually look back on this experience in his life to remind him of the power of God that was continually available to him, as we read in 2 Peter chapter 1, where he says, "For we did not follow cleverly devised stories when we told you about the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ in power, but we were eyewitnesses of his majesty. He received honor and glory from God the Father when the voice came to him from the majestic glory saying, 'This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased.' We ourselves heard this voice that came from heaven when we were with him on the sacred mountain." The mountain was never about temporary inspiration, but daily dependence. The mountain was never about escape from the valley, but endurance in the valley. And some of us may feel like we're still on the mountain, we're savoring God's presence, and others we maybe feel like we're buried in the valley facing conflict or doubt. But the good news is that Jesus is present in both, regardless of where we find ourselves. And he invites us to listen to him and depend on him wherever we are. The mountain points us to Jesus, and the valley drives us to depend on him. And that's what's needed to follow the unexpected King every day. Would you pray with me? Father, we're so thankful for your presence with us. We're so thankful